Can the Baltimore Ravens out-duel the New York Jets in free agency for wide receiver Odell Beckham Jr.? We talk about that, what the Ravens have actually done through the first 2 weeks of 2023 free agency, look at Ravens draft needs, mock drafts from Twitter, and so much more coming up next here on this episode of Locked On Ravens.
You are Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into another edition of Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast. I'm your host, Kevin Ostreicher of Ravens Wire, and we're here as always on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you so much for being here with us today, tuning in and making us your first listen each and every day. We're free and available on all podcasting platforms, including over on YouTube. It is free to subscribe, both in video form on YouTube and in audio form wherever you get those podcasts. So thank you again for being here. And if this is your first time, or if you're returning to the channel or the show, be sure to hit that subscribe button. You can turn notifications on as well to see when our latest episodes come out, when we go live on YouTube. Those replays also always in audio form as well. We're daily, so 5 days a week here. Ravens all the time, news, analysis, updates, so much more here. We have it for you again, Monday through Friday, 6 a.m. Eastern time. And we're back here. It is a Taco Tuesday, and we have some stuff to talk about. Some reports coming out yesterday about the Ravens and who they could potentially be targeting in free agency. And it's someone we've talked a little bit about here on the show over the past couple of weeks, couple of months, even dating back to last offseason, in Odell Beckham Jr. Now, Adam Schefter reporting that the Ravens actually submitted a contract offer to Odell, and we'll kind of see what happens there, Adam Schefter said. But he said that the teams in the mix are the Ravens, the New York Jets, who have been rumored to be a spot for him for a while now, possibly the Los Angeles Rams. But it seems like, at least right now, the two teams for Odell Beckham Jr. in free agency are the Ravens and the Jets. So I want to talk a bit about just, can the Ravens out-duel? Can they out-duel this New York Jets team in free agency to obtain the services of Odell Beckham? We'll talk about that, what each team has to offer, what Odell himself is looking for, what he brings to the Ravens in the first segment. Then we'll move on to free agency, the actual moves the Ravens have made so far in free agency in the second segment. And it hasn't been a lot. We'll take a look who they've added, who they've lost, who they've re-signed. We'll give them a grade. We'll talk about what the consensus is around the league from insiders, writers, fans. We'll get a bunch of different perspectives there. Then in the final segment, we'll move into draft mode. We'll take a look at some Ravens draft needs after these first 2 weeks of free agency, which, spoiler alert, not a lot has changed. And we'll also take a look at some mock drafts on Twitter as well. So a ton to dive into today. Let's get into the content. First, starting off with Odell Beckham Jr. Again, seems to be a prime free agent target for the Ravens. And this, to me, is the only needle-moving wide receiver still available on the market. There were others. I mean, Jacoby Myers, Allen Lazard, Juju Smith-Schuster, DJ Chark, other guys as well, Adam Thielen, who got released by the Vikings. But those guys are all off the board. And now Odell Beckham, to me, is the only guy who I would be like, okay, this is an actual upgrade of the position and a substantial one at that. Now, Odell, obviously for him, the history over the past couple of years had a pretty rough tenure in Cleveland, ended up getting released mid-year, then signs with the Rams, helps them win the Super Bowl, but tears his ACL, has a serious knee injury in that Super Bowl, spends all year rehabbing, doesn't latch on with an NFL team. This past season, I know there was interest from the Cowboys and the Bills reportedly and a lot of other different teams, but the knee just was not there. And so Odell did not play in 2022. So coming off of that knee injury, he's a player that, again, I don't think you're going to get necessarily prime Giants Odell, where there has been a clear drop-off in the production from when he was in New York to where he is now in his career, 30-plus wide receiver and all that. I know there are people who are concerned with the age, concerned with the injury history, and even concerned with the character. I'm personally not. I think Odell's just a competitor. He wants to win. I know there was a lot of people call him a diva for what went down in New York in some of the situations he had there. I know him and Josh Norman, I think that run-in was, one of the more controversial things that Odell has had following him throughout his career. But I think for what the Ravens need right now, they need a veteran guy. And I know we've talked about DeAndre Hopkins, and we've talked about guys like Cortland Sutton or Jerry Jeudy or Mike Evans, but I think Odell is someone who, depending on the price, would be a pretty realistic option for them, who actually could move the needle. And we know what Odell's ceiling is. Again, I don't think it's as high as it was when he was in New York, but I think he provides you something, assuming he stays on the field. Now, that's one aspect. The other aspect I just mentioned is the contract. Reportedly, Odell started free agency and was seeking a 1-year deal, or at least a deal right around $20 million per season. That's a lot of money. That's too much for Odell. He's apparently dropped that asking price reportedly to a 1-year, $15 million deal. That is still too much money per year, in my opinion, for Odell, and it just doesn't work. The Ravens can't give out 1-year deals right now unless they make serious cap room, because, again, that 1-year deal, you can't move that money around. If you sign a guy for 2 years or 3 years or 4 or 5, etc., you can move the money around, make the cap hit what it is. You can make certain things, signing bonuses. Not that you can't do that on 1-year deals, but you can't move the money around on a 1-year deal. You don't have nearly any flexibility, at least not nearly as much as you do if you sign a multi-year contract. So what this tells me is Odell's looking for that prove it deal. He wants to make a lot of money on that deal. He still believes in his value. I think a lot of people do. But I think $15 million, if the Ravens end up signing him, I would be shocked if it was for that price. I just think that is too much for him. And the Ravens don't have the flexibility right now to give out a 1-year deal worth that much money because of the flexibility that, again, they just don't have. So then the reports, we talked about it. The Jets seem to be the other team here. Obviously, Aaron Rodgers apparently going to the Jets. I mean, the trade hasn't been agreed upon yet. Maybe it comes down closer to draft weekend as we're getting closer to that. But kind of like the Tom Brady situation, Ian Rappaport kind of talked about this on the Pat McAfee show, where there was a lot of movement around Tampa Bay when Tom Brady signed there, kind of the veteran quarterback on the last legs of his career. Not that Brady was bad then or Rodgers is bad now. They're not terrible, horrible quarterbacks. But this veteran guy who I think elevates the ceiling of the Bucs, or in this case, the Jets. And then veterans started to go to Tampa Bay and sign with Tampa Bay. They say, hey, this is an opportunity to go win a Super Bowl with an all-time great, with a future Hall of Famer. And that did happen. Brady did bring a Super Bowl to Tampa Bay. So for Odell, if Rodgers goes there, I know it's been the report that Odell and the Jets, they've been linked together for a while. So what does Baltimore have to offer that the Jets don't? Well, I think that starts with Lamar, where I think a lot of people are looking at this Odell situation and saying, well, what does it matter if Lamar's not there? Like, who's throwing him the football? Why would Odell choose Baltimore and Tyler Huntley or Will Levis or Anthony Richardson over the Jets and Aaron Rodgers and being paired with Allen Lazard over there, and just what that could be? Well, I think one aspect of this is Todd Monken. I think Todd Monken does have an influence on this. I'm not saying it's the only influence, and just because the Ravens have Todd Monken, Odell's coming to Baltimore. But I think it is an aspect of the entire situation where Monken was asked about Odell during his introductory press conference with the Ravens, and he glowed about him, talked about him as a player, as a person. Really seemed to like what Odell brought to the table for him when he was in Cleveland. Those two were paired together in Cleveland, and they had a good year together. Odell had over 1,000 yards. I mean, they had a good season in Cleveland together. So that's one aspect of it. And then I think it just comes down to money. Like, I don't think money's the only thing with Odell. I think he wants to go to a situation where he can be comfortable, where he can be, I think, a focal point. I think in Baltimore, if you sign Odell, that's your big wide receiver move. And then you can still add maybe a guy in the first round, like a Jackson Smith and Jigba, Quentin Johnston, a Zay Flowers, Jordan Addison. Or you could say, you know what, we have Odell. And there's Rashad Bateman and Devin Duvernay and even Nelson Aguilar, if you want to go that far down the depth chart. So maybe just a third rounder, a fourth rounder, Jonathan Mingo, Rakeem Jarrett, some of these other guys in that, Marvin Mims, that other mold there, where you could say, all right, the Ravens might say to themselves, we have enough, we're going to take a corner in the first round. That might be what they're saying to themselves. So for Odell, I think it will come down to the Jets and Ravens. It makes a lot of sense. If the Ravens end up missing out on Odell, I think, first of all, I think a lot of fans will be very upset because it was the almost team. Odell's going right on that almost first team for the Ravens, that almost Ravens first team, where, again, DeAndre Hopkins on that list. We have a new recent addition to that list in Darius Slay. So I think a lot of Ravens fans would be upset there, but then you have to pivot to another veteran option. DeAndre Hopkins, Courtland Sutton, Jerry Jeudy, etc. It just has to be. The Ravens cannot go into this year. I think a first-round wide receiver would be great. I'm very high on the first round, those four I just mentioned, but I think there has to be some veteran presence there that's not named Nelson Aguilar. So do I think the Ravens can out-duel the Jets for Odell? I think there's definitely a chance they can. I think that a lot of that does hinge on Lamar, though. I think that Odell and Lamar is a very intriguing pairing. I think the two would like to play together. And I think that'd be really cool if we saw an Odell and Lamar connection. You got Rashad Bateman there. So I know that there was a picture circulating around of Odell and Rashad Bateman when Bateman was still at Minnesota. So I think there are connections there, but Odell was on the Jets wish list, or Aaron Rodgers wish list for the Jets to go out there and get. So this is going to be I think it's going to be a tight race. And hopefully, I mean, I'm fine with Odell. Again, not at 15 million. If you can make that price come down to 10, like I don't think anywhere less than 10 is what Odell's taken. You can get that price down to less than 10. I am definitely okay with that, but you got to make the money elsewhere. I think Odell can be a solid option for them. He can be a very low end wide receiver one, I think, in this offense. I think, again, the ceiling is not quite what it was in New York, but for Odell, it's going to come down to the wire, I believe, and we'll see what the Ravens can do, what their offer actually is. I'm interested to know what that is, but we'll continue this conversation in the second segment, talking a bit about what the Ravens wide receiver room could look like with Odell Beckham Jr. in it. We'll also talk a bit about, again, what the Ravens have actually done so far through 2 weeks of free agency. So be sure to stay tuned. So lots to dive into on Locked On Ravens. But first, this episode is brought to you by Built Bar. And the Built March Madness bracket is here. We know you have a favorite bar. Puff, and now's your time to make it count. Go to BuiltMarchMadness.com to vote for your favorites. I'll be voting for the brownie batter Puff, and if you want the Ravens to win, you better be voting for that bar to support your team and support your bar or Puff. And when you vote for your favorite bar Puff, you'll be entered in a drawing where 50 lucky Locked On listeners will get a free box of Built. Not only that, but one Locked On fan will receive a 12-month subscription to Built to have Built's best bars or Puffs delivered monthly straight to your door. You got to try Built. Built, the best protein bar ever. Seriously, they're so amazing you won't think they're good for you. What makes Built bars and Puffs so good is, for starters, they're all high in protein, low in sugar, and covered in 100% real chocolate. That is right, real chocolate. Run to BuiltMarchMadness.com right now to vote for your favorite bar or Puff and pick up a box while you're there. You can vote every day in March, so hop in and support your pick. We return here. It's our second segment of Locked On Ravens. Kevin Oestreicher still talking with you here on this Tuesday. We just talked about Odell Beckham, the reports that the Ravens have offered him a contract and that they're kind of dueling with the Jets. Seems to be the Ravens and the Jets with maybe a sprinkle of the Rams in there, as well as teams vying for Odell's services. But with that, ends up being just what is the Ravens wide receiver room with Odell in it. So I put together a tweet. I put it out about what it would look like with Odell. So I'll read it out. The receiver room in Baltimore would look like before the draft, heading into it: Odell Beckham Jr., Rashad Bateman, Devin Duvernay, Nelson Aguilar, James Prochet II, Tylan Wallace, Shamar Bridges, Andy Isabella, and Mike Thomas. And so I asked is that if it happened, how would you feel about that Ravens wide receiver room heading into the 2023 draft? And there were very mixed responses. If you hear this on YouTube, you can comment below how you feel about that wide receiver room, a top four with Beckham, Bateman, Duvernay, and Aguilar heading into the draft. So maybe you can still add a first-round wideout. You could maybe add a third-round wideout if you want to. It depends where the needs are, what the Ravens do for the rest of free agency. The fact of the matter is, though, the Ravens haven't really done a ton. They have not done a ton this free agency. I also put together, again, we are now more than 2 weeks into free agency. And so to, I guess, honor the occasion, I put together the Ravens moves through those 2 weeks of 2023 free agency. And so they have obviously added Nelson Aguilar. That's been it. They have lost Ben Powers, Josh Oliver, Chuck Clark, Calais Campbell, and Tristan Colon. And they've re-signed Justice Hill, Nick Moore, Geno Stone, Delshon Phillips, and Trayvon Mullen. That's not super inspiring. It is not a super inspiring offseason so far. The good part is there's still more to go. I mean, you still have a little ways to go before the draft. And then obviously you can address your roster through picks. And then if you sign a guy like Odell or you trade for somebody, there will still be free agents available. But the first wave is gone. Even the second wave, really, of free agency is gone. Now it's just guys trying to find new homes and new teams that haven't been picked up yet. Still some quality options. I'm not going to say they're not, but it's just the Ravens offseason has been put under a microscope by a lot of people, I think, because of the Lamar Jackson situation, where it has been Lamar. And it's hindered their ability, I think, to do a lot. I'm not saying Lamar's the only reason why, but it's a big reason. That $32.4 million cap hit kind of stares at you when you look at the cap sheet. There's 14.5% of their cap, for those who have not heard me say that before. I've said it quite a bit here on Locked On Ravens. But again, you have writers and pundits, giving the Ravens Fs for their offseason. I think CBS Sports, if I'm not mistaken, they were the only team to get an F in their offseason grades so far. There were even a couple of writers on CBS Sports. One of them even said that, he has no idea what the Ravens are doing, and he doesn't think they know what they're doing either. It's been that kind of offseason where we look at this on paper, right? Let's literally look at the list on paper and compare. Again, added versus lost, and I'll even throw the re-signings in the added category. So Nelson Aguilar, Justice Hill, Nick Moore, Geno Stone, Delshon Phillips, Trayvon Mullen versus Ben Powers, Josh Oliver, Chuck Clark, Calais Campbell, Tristan Colon. On paper, the Ravens are a worse football team. They are. What they have added versus what they have subtracted so far on Tuesday, April 4th here, they are a worse football team than they were when they started free agency. You lose a guy like Calais Campbell, you lose a solid offensive lineman in Ben Powers, solid depth tight end in Josh Oliver, also a solid safety in Chuck Clark, and offensive line depth in Tristan Colon. Nelson Aguilar is a wide receiver. He's a wide receiver. Then I think Justice Hill, solid number 3, number 4 running back, special teams guy. Nick Moore, an all-pro long snapper. Geno Stone, very solid safety depth. Delshon Phillips, special teamer. And Trayvon Mullen, just, probably bottom end corner depth at this point. That's the lost category is outweighing the added category right now. And for a lot of people, that is very concerning because of the fact that you look around the league. You look at around the division, even the AFC North with Pittsburgh and Cincinnati and Cleveland and what they have added. It's tough right now, especially with how the Ravens season ended last year. Obviously, no Lamar Jackson to end that year. We still don't know if Lamar is going to be back in Baltimore in 2023 regardless, but that's the uncertainty. That's the area where people are like, what in the world is going on in Baltimore? Because is it Lamar Jackson? Is it Tyler Huntley? Is it a rookie quarterback? We have no idea. And the fact that this could linger on beyond the draft, it's a little concerning. It's definitely a little concerning for me if it goes that far, if it lingers into OTAs, in training camp, in the preseason. Will Lamar hold out? Will Lamar not play a snap this year? I think that's a conversation for another time as we kind of get closer to that. I think right now we're just kind of weighing out and seeing what the roster is going to be heading to the draft. There are these checkpoints. You check out after the Super Bowl, once the offseason starts for all the teams. You look at, pre-free agency, you get to actual the period where you're able to negotiate with players, not the official start of the league year, but the legal tampering period, then the actual start of the league year a couple days later. And then you kind of go to the draft, the combine as well. That's important too. Don't get me wrong. But then the draft is another one of those checkpoints where you check in and say, all right, what does the roster look like compared to the end of the season versus free agency versus the draft? And right now, the Ravens have some work to do. I think the defense is in a solid spot overall. Definitely need some corners in there. It can't just be Marlon Humphrey and everyone else. You got to have other options. Wide receiver definitely needs some work as well. Not discounting that position at all. Is it Odell? Is it DeAndre Hopkins? Is it a first rounder? We don't know yet, but there has to be another big time ad, or at least a big time ad at that position. And then adding depth along the edges. Losing Calais Campbell, the Ravens have defensive line depth right now. But what does it look like after next year? I think edge is a position that a lot of people are overlooking right now. You got David Ajabo, you got Adafe Owe, you got Tyus Bowser, but who else? I think one young guy and one veteran. So whether that's Justin Houston or Jadeveon Clowney, I know is someone who's Jadeveon Clowney's been linked to the Ravens for like 3 years or something. So maybe it's Jadeveon Clowney, I don't know, but one veteran and one young guy in that room. So again, not a very inspiring offseason for the Ravens so far. I'm not going to sit up here and give them an A because they don't deserve an A. They haven't earned that. I give them a D. Their offseason just hasn't been good to me. I wish it was better. I wish they were able to go out there and add, but they just don't have the ability to because this Lamar situation is dragged out for so long, and it is engulfed. It has swallowed this entire offseason up for the Ravens. It has not been a normal offseason for those listening, for those watching, for me, for everybody. It has not been a normal Ravens offseason where I've had to scrap content plans because this has happened with Lamar. I didn't do free agency previews the way I usually do them because we talk about Lamar, because you just can't. You can't plan for something like this where there are so many different avenues the Ravens can go down with a trade or an extension or a franchise tag where he plays on it or he holds out. There are so many different avenues right now, so many different checkpoints. And that, to me, it's been a whirlwind, and it hasn't resulted in a good offseason for the Ravens through 2 weeks here. And you can look at that on paper And you can even just feel it out and be like, this has not been the offseason that a lot of people wanted, especially I think in such a pivotal offseason where the defense is there. You got to add a little bit, but the defense is there. Can you make the offensive additions and can you retain your star quarterback to maybe get you over that hump these last couple of years, this last decade, the Ravens have not been back to the AFC Championship game since 2012, 2013, the year they won the Super Bowl. So definitely some stuff has to change here. I hope the Ravens will be able to make some moves. Maybe that move starts with Odell. You're able to make a couple of more moves and then get the draft going as well. But coming up, we'll be talking about the draft a little bit, looking at some Ravens draft needs after these 2 weeks of pretty uneventful free agency moves for Baltimore. Look at some mock drafts on Twitter and more, so be sure to stay tuned. So lots to dive into on Locked On Ravens. We are back, our final segment of Locked On Ravens. Kevin Oestreicher still talking with you here again. Thank you so much for being here with us. Be sure to subscribe for free. No money involved, both on YouTube and in audio form, wherever you get your favorite podcast. If you have a family member or a friend who wants Daily Ravens content, be sure to throw them our way, as we'll be able to give them the best Daily Ravens content. I strive to give the best Daily Ravens content here on YouTube and obviously in audio form as well. But let's now talk draft a little bit. We'll talk first draft needs after 2 weeks of free agency. Again, not a lot has changed, as we talked about, where Nelson Agholor has been the only add. I mean, I guess it maybe eliminates the need for 3 wide receivers. I mean, I still wouldn't be mad if Baltimore went out there and took 2. Again, my plan has always been, and for those who haven't heard it before, 6 wideouts is my default. That's what I default to. And the Ravens, to me, the only 2 on their roster that are safe going into the offseason were Rashad Bateman and Devin Duvernay. And I said, well, you add 2 young guys and you add 2 veterans. I think that's a solid room now. One of those veteran spots is taken up by Nelson Agholor. So, whether it's Odell or DeAndre Hopkins or a Demarcus Robinson, hopefully not a Demarcus Robinson type, because a Nelson Agholor and Demarcus Robinson veteran pairing is just, it's back to square one at that point. But I think wide receiver still a very big need at this point. Again, this is pre-Odell. If it happens, it might not even happen. But if it does happen, this is pre-Odell. Then I think if Odell signs, you go corner. I think if Odell signs, you go corner in the first round. If Odell doesn't sign and you don't have an option there, you can either go wide receiver or corner based off of who's available. If the top 4 guys are gone, I wouldn't reach for a guy like Josh Downs. I might trade back. I think Josh Downs in the late 20s, early 30s home run pick, early 20s. I might want to get some more value there from Eric DeCosta. I'm not saying that Downs is going to be a bad player. I really, really like him. But again, the point there stands. So wide receiver and corner, still definitely the 2 biggest needs for this team. I, again, wouldn't be shocked to see him take an edge player. Maybe they'll take an offensive lineman for future purposes. Maybe a running back, J.K. Dobbins. This is a contract year for him. We could maybe see him in a different uniform next offseason, which is, I think, very weird to think about, considering it feels like he's barely played for the Ravens. Really unfortunate injury luck, and he hasn't gotten a lot of carries. I mean, he's a guy that doesn't get 20-plus carries a game in this Ravens offense, even for how much they ran the ball under Greg Roman. It's been him and Gus Edwards kind of splitting the load there. Not saying that's been a bad way to do things, but I think Dobbins definitely does deserve more carries. So if he has a career year here in 2023, the Ravens historically do not pay running backs, so we'll see how that ends up unfolding. So maybe a running back in the mid-rounds, a potential J.K. Dobbins replacement. I would love to see J.K. Dobbins back in Baltimore. Personally, I think he is one of the best young running backs in this league right now and has the potential to be really – he has star potential. There's no doubting that, but we'll see what happens there. Tight end, they're good. Quarterback, again, it just depends. Like, if Lamar's in Baltimore – maybe you take like a Stenson Bennett. I know that's been kind of the pick for a lot of people with the Todd Monken connection dating back to the Georgia days, which were not that long ago, obviously, but maybe a Stenson Bennett. If Lamar is traded or leaves, that's a different conversation. Is it Anthony Richardson? Is it Will Levis, Bryce Young, CJ Stroud? Did you go Hendon Hooker? Is that someone who ends up getting the call from the Ravens? So quarterback is one I don't really know. And then on the defensive side of things, inside linebacker, I think they're set there. Patrick Queen, Roquan Smith, that duo. Safety, I think they're okay as well. Maybe they take a late round guy, but I think, again, having Marcus Williams, Kyle Hamilton, Geno Stone, you could play Darius Washington there if you want to, Brandon Stevens too. I think they're pretty set. Maybe an undrafted guy comes in free agency wise. But let's take a look at a couple of mock drafts from Twitter here. Again, we did a mock draft Sunday on Twitter. Our mock draft Monday episode dropped yesterday. So if you want to check that out, who I picked for the Ravens in my latest mock draft, be sure to check that out. But let's first get into a mock draft from Augustine Chouaki, who says, considering we sign a solid veteran corner and pick up OBJ. So at 22, Bijan Robinson. Ooh, controversial. Okay. Bijan Robinson, Texas running back at 22. Sidney Brown, safety from Illinois, 86. Xavier Hutchinson, wide receiver from Iowa State at 124. Isaiah McGuire, edge from Missouri at 157. And Alex Austin, corner from Oregon State at 199. So I get the thinking here. Again, he says signing a solid veteran corner and picking up OBJ. So that's pretty much two needs addressed veteran-wise. But I still think the Ravens need more, even I would say corner. So if the Ravens pick up OBJ and sign a veteran corner, so let's say it's Marcus Peters or Rocky Yassin or something like that. To me, my plan this offseason, like my perfect plan, was trading for DeAndre Hopkins and re-signing Marcus Peters while also picking a corner in the first round. To have, we've seen the 3 cornerback rotations in Baltimore before, right? The Marlon Humphrey and Brandon Carr and Jimmy Smith, Marlon Humphrey, Marcus Peters and Jimmy Smith. Those 3 corner rotations, 3 solid corner rotations are really good. So I'm not saying Bijan Robinson is not going to be a great player in the NFL. He's going to be really, really good. But for what the Ravens need right now, for the limited cap spending they're able to do right now, I think it'd be in their best interest. And again, I don't know who was on the board during this, but I think that I would rather lean corner here. So with Deonte Banks, a Cam Smith, Joey Porter Jr., if he's there, even though I don't think he's going to be there. I might even lean wide receiver. Even with OBJ, I might lean wide receiver over Bijan Robinson. I just think positional value is important. And for the Ravens, again, Bijan Robinson could be the J.K. Dobbins replacement. You have him for 4+ years, the 5th-year option there as well. But I just think that right now, in this scenario that's laid out, I would go corner in that situation. I like Bijan Robinson as a player. I also like the other players here. Sidney Brown, I think, is really good. Safety at 86. Xavier Hutchinson, a really solid mid-round wide receiver prospect. So an interesting one here from Augustine. I appreciate this one here. Let's now get into one from Be More Finest, who has the Ravens taking Jordan Addison, wide receiver from USC, at pick 22. Rasheed Rice, wide receiver from SMU, at 107. Jacorian Bennett, corner from Maryland, at 124. Ivan Pace Jr., linebacker from Cincinnati, at 135. Catrell Clark, the corner from Louisville, at 157. John Gaines, the offensive lineman from UCLA, at 187. Thomas Nkoum, the edge from Central Michigan, at 199. And Darius Davis, the wide receiver from TCU, at 245. And I think for this one, Jordan Addison, one of my favorite wide receivers in this class. I would definitely not be mad at him at 22. I don't know where 86 went. I'm assuming Be More Finest traded it. I can't see the trade that he made, but Rasheed Rice in the 4th round is solid. I might go corner there instead. Well, Jacorian Bennett is taken right after Rasheed Rice at 124. So it's 2 corners, 3 wide receivers. I think 3 is too many in terms of the draft. I'd probably only go 2 here. 2 corners, 2 wide receivers are my max for both those positions. Then linebacker depth, interior offensive line depth, the edge depth I was talking about too. So Addison and Rice, a really nice duo there. Jacorian Bennett also brings, combine standard. I think he's going a lot higher than 124 personally, but hey, you know what? If Mock Draft Simulator gives you definitely take whatever it is there. And then we'll do 2 from Tony Yayo to round out this. Is first, Quentin Johnston, the wide receiver from TCU, is the pick at 22. Zach Charbonnet, the running back from UCLA, is at 86. Nick Hampton, edge from Appalachian State, at 124. Jacorian Bennett, corner from Maryland, at 157. And Dante Demas Jr., wide receiver from Maryland, at 199. Then second one, Deonte Banks, Maryland, corner at 22. Eli Ricks, corner from Alabama, at 86. Bryce Ford Wheaton, wide receiver from West Virginia, at 124. Jacorian Bennett, corner from Maryland, at 157, and Yaya Diaby, the edge from Louisville, at 199. So the second one, again, as I kind of said, 3 corners is probably a little too many for me. 1 too many. Banks and Ricks, really solid. I like Jacorian Bennett too, don't get me wrong, but maybe I would, instead of Ricks, take a wide receiver at 86, or instead of Bennett, take a wide receiver at 157. So it would be 2 wide receivers and 2 corners as opposed to 3 corners and 1 wide receiver. But the prospects themselves, Banks, Ricks, and Bennett, really solid trio. I think the Ravens need to address more positions than just corner. It feels like that's a very corner-heavy draft. Quentin Johnston, I'm probably a little higher on than a lot of other people. I still see the concerns, definitely. But I think, again, I don't even think he makes it to 22, so I don't think a lot of people have to worry about that. Running back at 86 would be, I see the vision. I see the vision with that. I think Charbonnet is a very interesting prospect. Then edge before corner. So corner at 157 is the first one here. I'm taking a corner probably 86 or 124. And then Dante Demas. So beginning and end is a wide receiver here for Tony Yeo. So both I like the prospects in both of these. Don't get me wrong, but I think just balancing it out a little bit. I think the second one is a little less balanced out, like very corner heavy. The first one I think is a little more balanced in terms of two wide receivers, one corner, a couple of guys there, but three corners, a little too corner heavy for me personally there. But that's just me. Maybe the Ravens take three corners and I'll be like, all right, you know what? Tony was right. So we'll look out for that over draft weekend. But that's all I have for you here today on Locked On Ravens. Thank you so much for tuning in with us today. Again, be sure to subscribe, like this video. You can comment down below if you want to get involved in the conversation on YouTube, and also subscribe for free in audio form, for free both on YouTube and in audio form. No money involved either way. No worries about that. When we get back here tomorrow, some more Ravens content from us. So be sure to stay tuned for that, and I'll see you right back here tomorrow.